Hey there, and welcome back to Checkbox Other, the podcast for those that don't fit in a defined box or category. I am your host, Nikki Innocent, and oh my goodness, how are we already midway through August? What happened? Where's the summer going? Oh, well, I am just so excited that you're taking some of these, what they like to call dog days of summer, and spending them with me and being so generous with your ears and your attention to join me here on the podcast. I am so very grateful. So if you have missed any podcasts up until this point, we've had, I believe, 10 interviews so far, and today's will be the 11th. So if you've missed any of those, do go back and check them out. On my website, you can go to nikkyinnocent.com/podcast. All of the episodes are up on there with their accompanying show notes. Or if you're listening to this on any platform, iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, all of the episodes should be at your fingertips. So I hope if you haven't listened yet to all of them, you have a moment to take a listen. If you have, but you were either speeding through them or didn't get a chance to go all the way through and somebody piqued your interest, this is my invitation to go back for either a second listen or to finish it up. I've gotten some notes from people recently that said, I listened to this episode when it came out, and I just listened to it again, and it has a whole nother meaning, and it's hitting my life at just the right time. So I really encourage you to take this more slow season, hopefully slow season for those of you that are listening, that you're hopefully heading into at least some rest and relaxation this weekend, to really let the messages sink in and make some sort of transformative change. I know personally for me, I feel like the luckiest one here. I get to have these conversations and really get to hear from you the incredible stories that come about from listening, or that you have in your life where you have felt othered and you want somebody to be a witness. So speaking of that, if you want to share your other story, or if there's a topic that you really want us to cover, head on over to the website. You can go to nikkyinnocent.com/podcast. And on that page, there is, I think it should be right there when you get in there, but if not, just scroll down a slight bit and there is a link called Join the Conversation. If you have literally any kind of feedback, I would love to hear it. It'll help shape the podcast moving forward. We monitor that inbox, and it is so helpful to hear from you. So take a minute, if you got a minute, drop some love, drop some suggestions, drop your other story in there. We want to hear from you. Today's interview is with a dear friend, a mentor, an inspiration, a motivator. There's not enough words for Jennifer Brown. Jennifer Brown is an award-winning and a best-selling author. She is a diversity and inclusion expert. She is the CEO and founder of Jennifer Brown Consulting, and you're going to hear so much more about her. But I just want to take a minute because Jennifer and I talk about some really, really poignant stuff and some extremely relevant topics right now in the larger frame of the world and society that we're in. And I just want to take a minute to pull back and really give, my own personal plug to something that we reference a couple times within the podcast. And I personally am in the middle of reading the book White Fragility. And by reading, if you've listened before, I like to listen. So I've got the actual hard copy of the book here because I was so excited when I started listening that I needed to start underlining stuff. So I ran out, bought the book, and I have that too. But White Fragility is all about why I'll just read you the tagline. So it's White Fragility, why it's so hard for white people to talk about racism. It's by Robin DiAngelo. And as a biracial woman who grew up in predominantly white spaces, and I'm trying to understand what whiteness means for me in my life, personally, internally, and then obviously externally understanding how my actions, behaviors influence racism, discrimination, and all the aspects that we're constantly, I think, being confronted with in society, especially if you've been in groups that have been in the majority or the quote unquote normal. You're hearing a lot more about racism. And one of the pieces of this that hardly gets spoken about, but I'm so happy that there is much more public discourse, is this idea of whiteness. So Robin DiAngelo has this book called White Fragility. If you are white, I recommend it. I have been, my poor mother, every time I talk to her, I'm like, did you get it yet? But I do really recommend you read that, listen to it, however you prefer to consume information. Also, there is a book that just came out this week. It's from Ibram X. Kendi. It's called How to Be an Anti-Racist. If you haven't heard of anti-racism, it is the idea of the work you're doing and the action that you're taking combating racism. Not saying I'm not a racist, but saying I am actively working to confront the systemic issue of racism. So again, a slight offshoot here from the episode today, which you will hear, we talk a lot about these topics and issues, but I do want to put in a plug for just really diving a little bit deeper into your own work around this stuff, whether you are a white person, whether you are a person of color, whether you are biracial like me, where you kind of identify in both places, but you're really not sure exactly how you feed and are impacted by this system that we live in. I really encourage you to explore. And explore in a safe space, explore in your own time. Don't expect yourself to be perfect. This stuff is deeply ingrained in our society over generations. And so to assume that we as individuals can flip a switch and decode ourselves or deprogram ourselves from any of this stuff is, I think it's a pretty mighty and lofty expectation to be able to just take that on just because we've decided to do that one day. There's a lot that goes into this stuff, and I really encourage you to take the leap if you're interested and willing. So now let me start plugging my girl Jennifer. So Jennifer Brown, she is incredible. She, as I mentioned, started Jennifer Brown Consulting, I believe it was about 14 or 15 years ago. She works in organizational development. You'll hear her background. Her background is an unconventional background in initially some nonprofit work. She was an opera singer. My goodness, how incredible is that? I feel like, oh, my face is hurting. I'm smiling so hard about her. We talk about so many different things, but she has this incredible book that is coming out on Tuesday. Now, it is called How to Be an Inclusive Leader, Creating Trust, Cooperation, and Community Across Differences. And it's all about your role in creating cultures of belonging where everyone can thrive. Jennifer also has a book that's called Inclusion. That was her first book. It was a best-selling book. Check it out on Amazon. And you'll hear in here, she talks about the difference between those two books and who the main audience is for each of them. But I am amped for this book that's coming out on Tuesday. So you get a sneak peek on the topics of conversation that we're going to cover today. But towards the end of the episode, I really, really do encourage you to stick through, because we're going to dive into kind of the 4 aspects of the spectrum that she talks about within this new book. And oh my goodness, you'll tell when I'm talking how excited I get about this. And I almost immediately just start adapting the language that she uses to express the spectrum that we're operating from, and the fact that we're always a work in progress, but we can continue to become experts in our own space. We can constantly push ourselves and also lead where we're able to lead. So many things we talk about. We talk about some of my favorite things. We talk about anger. We talk about emotional labor and what that looks like. We talk about how to sustain yourself in work that is pushing the boundaries and breaking the rules and really putting you in tough situations, how you actually create a life around that work that can support and sustain you. Oh God, we talk about perfectionism. This is all towards the end of this episode. My God, it's like we were pulling back the layers of the onion, and then towards the end, everything started syncing up so beautifully all together there. If you can't tell, I'm fangirling pretty hard on Jennifer. I was gonna break this into 2 episodes, got so excited. This is a longer episode. I cannot wait to hear what you think. Listen to it. Put your pre-order in. The pre-order already went to number 1 on Amazon's pre-sale list. Come on, you got to get there. My God. And if you do have the book, get the book, drop into that podcast outreach form, the Join the Conversation form, and let me know what you think. I am so eager to hear how her messages and her incredible insights have impacted your life and your world, and how you see this whole process of becoming a more inclusive world and your place in it. Okay. My goodness, I am so excited about this. The show notes, I will say this too, as I was going through here, the show notes for this particular episode are going to be jam-packed. So definitely feel free to head on over to the website to check that out so you can get all the links to the amazing things that we referenced throughout the episode. Okay, I'm done. I think I'm done here. I am so excited for you. I am so excited. I'll be listening to this again. I already know it. So enjoy. Happy listening, my friends.
Hello, Jennifer.
Hello, Nikki Innocent.
Oh, hello, hello.
Hello,
I'm,
hello.
I'm so excited that you are here. I am bubbling over.
Me too. Me too.
Oh my
Fun.
goodness. I know that we're going to have so many amazing things to talk about today, and I'm like on a pace. I feel like I'm on the pace even before we started recording. I was like, "Brrr," and I'm listening to you and I'm soaking it all up. I was like, hold on, we need to record this for other people to hear. So
Did
I'm
started to get into a groove too early, so
good,
yes,
but
glad we're recording.
if anybody had like been a fly on the wall in any conversations we had, that's kind of how it goes. So,
Yeah, exactly.
so I'm going to start off with getting getting a quick introduction of who Jennifer Brown is. I'd love to hear a little bit about your journey and what has gotten you to where you are today.
Sure thing. Okay, turbo version.
Yes.
Uh, grew up in Southern California, went east for college, graduated in my 20s, moved to Boston, which you know well. And I had a sense I wanted to make a difference with whatever I did. So I ended up at a couple community organizations, and I was a real activist in my 20s, and I loved it. If you told me I would be a corporate person someday, I'd be shocked. Um, so I worked for something called City Year, which is an incredible a sort of gap year or year that you take to devote to community service when you're between the ages of 17 to 23. So I did a myriad of jobs for them, really loved the purpose of the organization. I was also singing constantly. So I was singing with the Boston Symphony Orchestra in the chorus that goes to Tanglewood and travels all over the world with the BSO, and I was a studio vocalist and teaching voice, and I had a cover band, and so I was like, but it was always a hobby. And I
Mm-hmm.
said to myself at some point, I need to see if this is going to work for me. I need to try to make it for real. So I applied to conservatories. I got in New York. I moved to New York. I knew no one. I got my master's degree in vocal performance from Manhattan School of Music. And then, unfortunately, I would injure my voice several times in the course of training, which is really very arduous. I had a couple of vocal surgeries. My instrument would be forever compromised, as I like to say. And I just knew that I couldn't make it work. But performers in my network guided me then to the field of corporate training, which would get me on a stage, but it would be in front of adult learners in the workplace setting. And I didn't even know this was a thing. And I loved it. I ended up getting a second master's in HR and organizational change from
Yeah.
Freedom University, which started me in this new path that would end up being this like enduring passion, which is the whole topic of leadership and orgs. And then the diversity thing happened because I had been all that time I was out as LGBTQ. I came out when I was 22, but I was closeted as a performer. I was closeted as an entrepreneur for a while. It was very difficult to bring myself to my various career phases. And but eventually I would become certified as a woman-owned and LGBT-owned company, very proudly so. And I still maintain those certifications, and supplier diversity is a really important thing and allows us to meet the big companies that end up hiring us, which is fabulous.
Yeah.
But being LGBT became something I was proud of, and that's something I would share from now keynote stages everywhere. But it wasn't always so. And so we pivoted into diversity and inclusion when I kind of realized, wait a second, my LGBT identity is something that enhances my ability to be a consultant and a change agent. And I can marry these two things together. And lo and behold, I have a company now with 25 amazing people in it, and we're consulting across the Fortune 1000. Every day, on a given day, my team is several different places delivering programs, working on strategy. We have tons of diversity in our team of all kinds. And so I get to use my voice, just not as a singer, as I like to say. And I also get to integrate my identity with my work, and it actually makes me better at what I do, which is just incredible place to be. So I'm super blessed.
Oh, I got chills multiple times during that.
It's pretty
That,
cool. It wasn't cool
yeah.
as it was happening, but now I can look back and say, oh my gosh, it all happened for a reason.
Yeah, right. All those moments where you felt like this
Lost.
happening to me. It's kind
Yeah.
of like when they say things are happening for you. You're like, yeah, yeah, in the moment, sure,
Oh,
yeah, happening
yeah.
for me.
Yeah.
But now you look back and you're like, oh, I guess it did. Thanks. Oh, well, I think we might have talked about this once before, but I need to just give a little bit of love to City Year. City Year has
Yay.
huge part of my corporate life, actually. So both when I was at Bain and Company and Bain Capital, we worked with City Year. And when I was at Bain Capital, we had launched the Bain Capital Community Partnerships, which was our huge philanthropy engine, internally, externally. And City Year was our signature relationship. And so I was like, and I was the person that was like on the grounds of so many of the incredible people at City Year, from, Mike Brown all the way to like the students and the students in the classroom and the amazing core members. And then my sister became a core member for a year in East Boston.
I just know that.
Yes. So City Year, I still have, if you looked at my keychain right now, I still have my City Year keychain that I walk around with every day. So it's a truly transformational organization. And the people that choose to be a part of the City Year family are just truly transformational. So it just feels right that you're a City Year family member as well.
Well, it was so hard to leave to go pursue music. And Michael Brown, speaking of, was part of that group that encouraged me, go follow your passion. And it was so hard to leave a job in a community that is, as you say, like so purpose oriented, such a loving community, going after such important things. But I sort of quit and, got myself into school, left Boston, had no friends in New York, but they very much encouraged me to find my voice, literally. And it was such a blessing. And the other thing I think I learned from it is the corporate partnerships you mentioned. They were so adept at doing good and doing well and connecting for-profit and nonprofit in these really meaningful ways. And I still, to this day, I think that kind of patterned my thinking about, corporate America is not a bad thing. It's made up of people who are very altruistic, many of them. And that it's actually a place where a lot of change can happen, and funding can be dedicated to organizations like City Year. And it's sort of I think I understood corporate philanthropy and corporate social responsibility and diversity, of course, because the core is so diverse. And I'm this, white cisgender person, coming in, and I had never been exposed to all of those stories. So I actually think it was my first exposure to diversity in all its forms that I didn't at the time really understand, but I knew that I loved it and I knew that I wanted to be around it.
Yeah, and the education aspect of it on top of it all, right? That you're watching and creating spaces for yourself to learn and for those around you of all different levels and all different ages that are going through a transformative process together. That's incredible.
Totally awesome.
So I'd love to hear about what we talk about a lot in this podcast, is the time that you felt other. And one of the moments I heard you mention, I'm not trying to direct you in one of them, but I do want to make sure that I give a little bit of airtime to, was this moment of you deciding to leave California, come to Boston, then leave Boston and go to New York and know nobody in New York. Like, oh my goodness, that moment must have felt so challenging and oddly isolating in some ways, but also being in a huge, huge city. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that. And then if you have another story of a time you felt other, I'd love to hear both of those. So feel free to take this wherever you'd like.
Sure. So moving to New York is intoxicating, particularly when you're doing so to pursue a dream. And that's what, boys, the story is old as time, right? So it didn't matter where I was laying my head at night. And I was literally renting rooms because I didn't have like a steady place to live. And I was also commuting because my partner at the time was still in Boston. So I wasn't sleeping in my car. Don't get too worried. But I was kind of going night by night and starting grad school. And I just felt so fortunate. I really did. So it was scary, but again, I was fueled internally by this passion and the blessing I had to literally study voice full time, which is, talk about privileged to be able to like study your French and your German and get coached. And, it's ridiculous. It was really
amazing.
It was really amazing. And I wish that it had worked out. It was really, obviously really heartbreaking to realize my voice just couldn't take it. Like it just couldn't rise to the occasion. And I had so much will. And I was such a good marketer as well in terms of like what would be my brand as a performer. Like I got myself an agent, through somehow I always understood marketing. And so as a performer, obviously it's half your talent and it's half who you know. And I was really good at the working the angles, and honestly, that's still made me, a successful business person is that ability and the love of marketing that I have, that I carry through. But I remember I was kind of more adept at that than a lot of the performers I knew. But feeling othered, as a performer, it is such a heteronormative world, the world of casting directors and roles, and particularly in opera was like an old art form, right? So it's so sexist and so racist. Oh my goodness. Like, and the need to keep it sort of historically accurate means that a lot of these shows, they don't change. I mean, they're not being updated. So I think there's just an article actually about how the sexist, racist past of opera, and what are the audiences hearing and how are they reacting to it in the present day. Wow. So they have a lot of challenges. I pivoted into music theater, but even so, I was the small blonde that would be cast always as the little sister, or the young love interest. And I remember just feeling like if anybody knows who I really am, I'm not going to get cast for these things. Because if my personal life gets revealed as I get bigger and more famous, what's it going to mean? And so I was pretty closeted. I mean, I had gay friends in the opera world and the music theater world, all men, by the way, a few women. But we just couldn't be ourselves. And not only that, we had to act as if we were this like super normative version of ourselves in order to get cast in certain things. And the parts were really boring. I mean, I hate to say it, but and I don't want to judge anyone who does these parts for a living all day long, 8 shows a week, but it's like, really? Is this all there is? When I'm this like complex person, I just couldn't, like, that world couldn't hold me. The roles, we didn't have Hamilton back then. The best gig you could ever hope for is a recurring role in like Phantom of the Opera, for example. Okay. And I was like, that is not going to be good enough for me. It's just like, it's a great show, but I'm too creative. I'm very intellectually ravenous. I need new challenges. The rehearsal would be literally the best part for me would be rehearsal. And the second, like we were ready to go, I was like bored. Like, I don't want to repeat this 8 times a week for months on end. I don't. Right. So I think
and to keep it exactly the same, right?
Yes.
So
oh my gosh.
It's not that I can't test new things as I'm going. It's I have to have this blocking and this breathing and this cadence the choreography of how we're doing these things. Like it's all very mapped out and there's a path and a plan to it. Yeah.
So I don't think it could have held me creatively anyway. And then the voice stuff happened and I think again, it happened for a reason. And I think it's a little woo-woo, but I think the universe, and I can say this on your podcast.
Oh, yeah.
I think the universe literally took my voice away because I was not listening. I was not hearing what I needed to hear, which is you need to do different things in the world. This is what you think you're supposed to be doing right now, but it's really not. And I was like, oh, okay, so you're going to humble me, bring me to my knees, take away something that I literally can't breathe without right now. And that's the way that I'm going to hear it. And then I will be forced to reinvent. And thank God, I really am so grateful that it all happened, honestly, because I wouldn't have reinvented. And I certainly wouldn't have, I wouldn't have found my way into what I do now, where I feel like I get to use my voice like in such a different way that gives voice to others who don't have a voice. And like, wow, like it's not just a pretty song. It's like, it's the metaphor of the giving voice is so powerful. And it's what's needed, as you and I know, in the workplace where diverse voices, in particular, anyone who's not doesn't look or identifies a certain way, just has not been heard or seen. So it's so deep and profound. And it was a gift from the universe, although it didn't feel like it at the time.
No, it's so funny. So singing and voice and in this work, in not even just this work, but in the process of allowing yourself to step into the full version of who you are, it's such a pivotal aspect that I think goes overlooked. And there is something, when I was growing up, singing was a big part of what I truly enjoyed to do. And as I got older, it became less and less part of my everyday. And, I went to school for business. And so, sports, which I loved so much, was a huge part of my identity. And I loved
music and song and just being able to express. But also the thing about singing that I loved is that you could harmonize with other people. You could be part of it, and like it's like a whole different language that you're operating all together in. And there is this place of, we talked about the great philanthropy and the great impact that corporate can have, but specifically in a lot of our traditional workplaces, a lot of voices, if you are not the majority voice, if you are not the loudest, most deep masculine voice, if you are not the most senior person in the room, your voice doesn't matter, isn't heard, is silenced, is kind of squeezed. And so, one of the things personally for me as I moved from kind of what I call corporate Nikki to the version of myself that is a full version, I was actually searching for a while to find a voice coach, because I had, we're going to go a little spiritual woo-woo-y here too. Like actually Megan Baker, our first interview guest here, she actually talked to me about exploring my throat chakra because of how much effort I had put into constricting and silencing and swallowing the words that I felt like I needed to say but weren't allowed or okay there. And so even just the pairing of the freedom of song and the beauty of leveraging your voice in that way that is much more universal, and allowing yourself to fully step into your purpose and yourself is just like, it resonates. And it's like writing as quickly as I could because I get so many ideas and excitement.
I'm getting goosebumps now. That's so
my goodness.
Said. And, the throat chakra, it's so vulnerable, right? It's your soft throat. It's your, the vocal cords are a tiny instrument. And they make this giant sound. And sadly for me, they have to be perfect. They have to be perfectly aligned. They can't have nodules on them, But so think about the metaphor of that tiny thing making this giant sound in a hall. Yes. And then our want to be heard and seen and for who we are, and be as loud as we want to be and take up space, like vocally take up space. I love keynoting is like my favorite thing right now, and like the bigger audience, the better. I mean, I get excited walking on those stages, and I feel like the audience and I are doing this dance together. And my voice is the mechanism I connect with them, using. Yeah. And I just, and funny enough, the voice is totally cooperating now, of course, because I'm doing the right thing. So she's cheering me on. She said, universe is like, good little grasshopper, you're doing the right thing.
Well, and I'm going to even add on the rehearsal element of what you really enjoyed. It's like, as a keynote, right? You have some sort of plan moving forward. You know what you're going to talk about, but you have the freedom to make the messages you're putting out into the world resonate with that room, and you get the energy back. It's not that you're talking to a dark room where you don't see the faces and you don't get the kind of call and response vibe. Because it's not meant for you to be pin drop silent. It's meant for you to really be in energy with one another in the room. And I think, I've witnessed you speaking. I think you do a wonderful job of welcoming people to be a part, even if it's not a matter of them, joining in the song of the room, but really being a part of the room and the energy of the room. Like that's magic that comes along with keynoting and allows you to be a little bit more impromptu.
Yes, and I always say that my favorite part of keynoting is Q&A at the end. And most speakers don't want it because it's so unpredictable. I love that part because it's totally off script, and I have to use my head and my heart and think about, how do I want to answer this, and how do I get to as many people as I have that have questions, and how do I help them in this moment? And I have to do it in front of thousands of people, and I love the pressure of it, believe it or not. I really I thrive in that kind of pressured, that place where when you learn about what your sort of magic spot is, for me, it's the pressure, it's being under the lights, it's having to perform, and it's having to be creative and respond on the spot. And then I get to go into the recesses of everything I've learned and read and think about what is most of service right now for this person. Yeah. And sometimes the question that gets asked is not the real question too.
Yep.
You have to kind of know enough to sense what's underneath the question. And I love that challenge. Yeah. So anyway, it's my favorite part. It's the least scripted part. And I love it. And I almost hate not to have time for Q&A because that's when I really feel the audience. I feel like I'm not alone up on stage and I'm talking to, but I'm really working through something with people.
Yeah.
Really fun.
And you're collectively making this space
Yeah.
a better one. Yeah.
Yes.
You know, it's interesting. Personally, like people have asked me a lot of times, like, oh, do you get nervous? Do you, you know, when things go wrong, how do you handle them? And I'm so happy that you said what you just said, because I find myself being more of who I am, the less I have this perfect character to play, right? That more that like, if you're going to ask me questions or there's some on the spot stuff that I have to do, like that allows everybody to be more human with each other in the room, not just me, but like we all get to, you know, and that's why in keynoting and stuff, like I try very hard to incorporate so many different aspects of it. So it's not just my voice in your ears listening. Like, I want you to raise your hand. I want you to, you know, I'd love for you to laugh because there's something important about that. Like, and connecting and talking to the people next to you, like there's so much more when you're able to kind of be off the cuff and comfortable there. It's a transformative experience. I don't know. Do you know who Esther Perel is?
Yes, I do.
Oh my God.
Wow.
One of the most amazing Q&A people I've ever seen at the end of a keynote.
Seriously.
She had people go through and people asked about 8 questions in a row. She's like, one person asked a question and they all waited and she goes, oh no, who's next? And she went through 8 questions and then answered all 8 of them like it was a keynote speech. Like it was.
Oh, that's such a good idea. I should try that.
Oh, I was sitting there going, how is your brain so amazing like that? Like, because I'm sitting there, I'm like, great question. And she somehow was able to create on the spot how that happened. So it's just incredible to watch other people do it, but also to be in the room to watch how and experience how organic conversation and curiosity can really make such a huge difference.
I love the group experience. It's such a high, and there's such a community feeling, and for me, it's in being in community. I mean, when I'm keynoting, I'm with my people, even though those people may be resistant in my audience to my message, which, you know, you and I know it's, you know, I don't know how common it is. I kind of don't want to know. I kind of go in there and I hope I can win them over the course of time with me. You know, that's my goal. But the momentum of a group conversation, the trust you can engender in a room, the transformation you can create. Group dynamics are so fascinating. I studied that in my master's. I will never forget that class. And how does leadership emerge? How do you build trust quickly when it's a sea of faces? You know, how do you be vulnerable in the presence of others? How does that increase the willingness to be vulnerable in them?
Yeah.
Oh, and then what can you ask them to do that's vulnerable, like in the room in that moment? And they will always meet you. They never. That's funny when you said like somebody's like, well, what about things go horribly wrong? Like they never go wrong. There's no such thing as wrong. Right. Like you know, everything is goodness. Like you can work with it. You can reframe it. You can discuss it. Like literally it's there's no such thing. I mean, and people give so much. They want so desperately to feel seen and heard that I think me giving them permission from the stage, the rooms just erupt. I mean, they just, and that's how you know, like there's such an unmet need to have this conversation. And just like, whoa, like I'm just the catalyst for it. But like that's, like to give permission and then to see the energy and the vulnerability they will share with a total stranger sitting next to them, just because you sort of framed the issue and then you gave them permission to go. Yeah. Like, you can't even get them back. I know you've probably had this experience. I have to literally like jump up and down and wave my arms. Yeah.
You're like, hello. No? Okay.
Clap once if you can hear me. Right. If you can hear me.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So there's a part of this that I feel like, you know, there's this experience of you mentioned both in life and in your career when you had to kind of fit into the mold to pass, right? And I want to kind of pair that a bit with your podcast, The Will to Change, that talks about the fact that everybody has a diversity story. You might not necessarily know that they do by looking at them, but I'd love to hear a little bit about, you talked a bit about like, you know, becoming that 2-dimensional character in order to pass as whatever is appropriate for the supporting, you know, sister or the love interest. Right. But like how, when you're thinking about passing, because definitely in the event that we participated in together, that was part of the conversation that was had on stage. But then afterwards, there was such this feeling of, oh my God, I know what it feels like to have to show up as someone I'm not. So I'd love to hear a little bit about like what passing's been all about. how that's shown itself, I guess, in the will to change. I feel like there's a lot of conversation there. And then the other part of this that like passing is always gets this negative part, but I think there's some, privilege to the ability to show up in a way that makes people comfortable. I say that in such a
I know you're saying that very carefully.
yeah. I'm like, it's not really comfort. It's like blind following. But I'd love to hear a little bit about kind of your thoughts on passing, and the fact that there's so much below the surface that we don't know, and there's the benefit and the drawback to suppressing that.
Yeah, and you frame that so beautifully. I think you like hit on a lot of the salient issues with passing. So I try to make a point, as my friend Carmelyn Malalas, who's the head of human rights for New York City, she says she's a queer Filipina woman, first generation mom, and she says, I try not to take advantage of the passing privilege. And it was so beautiful. It stuck with me. And I share that from keynote stages when I force myself to come out, even perhaps when I'm not comfortable, maybe especially when I'm not comfortable, because maybe I'm looking out at the audience, I'm assessing, how welcoming they're going to be of my message. So, but I challenge myself, regardless of comfort, and to be authentic and honor who I am and honor my community, because I know that may be that one day that somebody sees somebody who shares some kind of part of their story and really takes heart from it. And it's important for people to be checked on their biases, because most of the time, nobody assumes I'm part of the LGBTQ community. And I that's a whole other podcast, but why is that? Is it my gender presentation? Yes. I present in a feminine normative way because that's the way I'm most comfortable. Although, funny story, in my 20s when I came out, I tried to butch it up because nobody saw me in the community as part of the community, looking the way I do.
Yep.
And so literally I heard through the grapevine at one point that some activists were talking, and they were like, oh, she's not really, she can't be gay. She's too fill in the blank. I don't even want to repeat the things they said. It's just odd. So I know that for me to be out about my story, like, normalizes someone that looks like me as part of the community. Like, that's important. And we, inside baseball, we talk about ourselves as like femme presenting women. So that's a word that actually is a thing. There actually used to be a conference called FemCon for women in the LGBTQ community that express this is our full gender expression, which is really interesting. And now everything is so different. I'm so old, but now, like, we're so like gender nonconforming, and I don't think there's like butch and femme, but that was a thing in the community when I came out. That was the language we understood, and it was what we saw around us, and it was what we saw in our mentors, which weren't many, by the way, of course. But they were what we saw in the women ahead of us, right? We saw, these sort of binary expressions of gender, which is really interesting, and nothing in between. And we're living in a very different world now, which we're so grateful for. So I was pretty invisible in the community, and I could be invisible. And I think what's important now is remembering that I might be able to pass about certain marginalized identities, but many people can't pass, right? So you're non-white, and your ethnicity is very clear to others, or, rightly or wrongly, that you can't pass. You can't choose to downplay something. Right. So I always want to say that. That's really important to remember. But the ability to pass is interesting to the positive side. I'm the Trojan horse. Right? Yes. So you wheel me up to the castle, and, I might be the sort of acceptable package, and I don't agree with that. And it highlights how biased we are. And it also highlights the people inside the castle who have all the power and who look a certain way. They may look at me and say, well, I share something with Jennifer, therefore I'm more comfortable around her. Like, I can hear her. Now, the Trojan horse, though, of course, they wheel the Trojan horse in the gates, and then the Trojan horse unleashes the entire army.
It's like, hello.
Hello, I'm here, and so are all of my friends. So, deal with it. So I love, but I think that's such a source of power for me. And I'm always hesitant to talk about, just like you kind of hesitated in trying to frame this. So I always want to say this is not a good thing in the world. It's not earned by me. I did not do anything to get welcomed into that room. Nothing. I mean, I might be a good consultant. Yes, I hope. so I earned it, from a work perspective. But if I'm getting any sort of unearned status because of what people think they see about me, where I've landed in all this is I'm going to use that. Like,
Right.
I'm going to spend my life using that. Like, that is my job. And you know what? It is a way for me to pay back the privilege I was born into.
Yeah.
What do we love our moms when they say, to whom much is given, much is expected?
Mm,
Much was given to me.
yeah.
And this is the only thing I can do in the world. And I won't even pay it back in this lifetime. I won't.
Right.
Like, there's no way I can. I have been so safe. I have been so educated. I have never wanted for food or shelter. When I came out, I had a plush carpet under me.
Mm,
It was nowhere near what the process is like for so many others. And now that I understand that, I mean, at the time it was traumatic.
right.
Of course. When we go through all that. But knowing what I know now, my goodness, like it's the color of it is totally different. So I like to, my energy these days is one of, I hope, one that is defined by others around me as allyship.
Yes.
And it's very interesting to be from the LGBTQ community, which is so marginalized, and half of us are still closeted at work, and
Right.
we struggle with violence, and some of us more than others. But what I can bring in terms of visibility and using my voice for stories that aren't heard, for experiences that aren't mine, that is my job right now. So the last couple of years have been such an education, particularly for white people, white cisgender people. And Robin DiAngelo's work, like White Fragility, is that wasn't even on our radar screens 3 years ago. And now we have so many books on whiteness, and oh my gosh, we're living in this age of deep understanding, if we'll accept it, about our identities and the role and the responsibility that those identities come with. And that's what I think a lot about these days.
Oh, I love that so much. And it's like, the next questions I'm going to ask or something.
Yes.
So I think this Trojan horse metaphor, I think, is great. There's a part of this that you talk about the accountability and the responsibility that you have when you're aware of your passing privilege. And it's funny, as you were saying that, it made me think of, like, lately, again, being much more awakened to my advantages and drawbacks. And really, from a lot of mine is very visual, right? Like, so half the year, and really, because I'm in Boston more than half the year, I can pass pretty light skinned. But noticing the difference when I have a suntan or I go on vacation and how I'm treated differently actually allows for much more kind of real-time reflection if I allow it, right? And so to understand the white fragility that is part of my identity, because I grew up in predominantly white spaces, and I didn't think of myself as a person of color necessarily, nor a white person, but because that was what I was surrounded by, so much of just the unspoken learning was to learn how to pass. But also, obviously, our history books are very white centric. So much of that was taught to me without understanding the implications that has, both in my kind of internal battle of understanding identity and the external presentation of who I am and who I have the opportunity to be in a room with that might not welcome me. Like, the amount of times, which I'm sure has happened for you, and you were mentioning, like, the amount of times I've been in a room and people don't know that my father is a Black man from Haiti, or that I am a biracial woman, and the things that are said. So you hear what people say when they aren't trying to be PC, right? So you get an understanding of, like, oh, there's pain that's causing that, or there's lack of understanding that's causing that. And it hurts me, yes. But I was welcomed into this room for some aspect of some reason, and it allows me to understand a little bit more. It doesn't give you the pass for being a discriminatory human being, right? It doesn't give you that, but it gives me a window into something that a lot of people might not necessarily have the opportunity to see. And from that place, I can create a space where I allow and bring more people in, whether they are the majority or the people that haven't been heard, to have more productive conversations and set expectations and boundaries of the kinds of things that are productive for us to move forward with.
Right. And what you're saying is we're really like bridge dwellers.
Yes.
And change needs all of us to inhabit the right place, like the right spot. And I feel I'm a bridge dweller. And so, I want to be the buffer Like if I can absorb that stuff so that somebody else doesn't have to get it in the face,
Yeah.
I can be that kind of marshland between the ocean and the coast. Like,
Yes.
call on me to be that, because I can take it, because it's not going to hurt me as much, because it's not you're not striking me at the core of my identity. Like, but I know, but I can somehow like bring my sort of unaware clients through a process so that they're ready to really have conversations with people who are affected.
Yes.
Like, because if they don't, then we just have this like intense polarization between these two sides. Like there's this two sides of the river and the bridge, and like nobody wants to get on the bridge. Like they say this about me, or they're biased, or they don't get it, or I heard that leader say this and I'm pissed, and rightly so. And the other side is saying, I'm trying to learn, and I'm going to make mistakes, or I don't understand this whole diversity thing. Like I don't want to get on the bridge.
Yeah.
So there's this tension that I think people like you and me, if we can make the middle space a safer place to be, but if we can also absorb the shock a bit, then I think that it lessens the burden on those who are most affected. Like if I can do some teaching and get to people before they get to be in direct interaction, I can help coach them. And that's why I read the second book. Like, honestly, it's like, read this and do your work before you ask for others to help you with the work. Like really, you need to come up to speed, up to a baseline, and only then can you really jump into the fray and kind of maybe have a prayer of knowing what to say and maybe using the right word. And, but there's people that are really being like left behind and leaving themselves behind. It's not just, it's some people's fault that they're literally opting out of this, and they're like, well, that's not me. I don't care about it. It's not my thing. I don't have to pay attention. Diversity is just like a nice to have, and I'll put it over here, but not on my to-do list.
Yeah.
And I try to make the argument for why that is very dangerous for you to be doing in any
across the board
context. And as a woman.
So there's a couple things that, oh God, I'm like, yes, let's talk about this forever. So knowing, you've been doing this diversity and inclusion work, and now diversity and equity and inclusion is kind of the standard of how we talk about it. You've been doing it for a while. And in the past, I say 5 to 10 years, but it feels a lot more, since the election in 2016, I feel like there's a lot more open communication about the lack of diversity, the lack of inclusion, the lack of just spaces that are safe for you to be different. And so the interesting part of that is there's a lot of talk about it, but there's, at least personally, I have found that so many people talk to me about these things without really a core understanding of what those words mean, what the impact is. And because it's become so mainstream, it's become a bit diluted. So I'd love to hear a little bit about what you think about that, and then how that has created what you're saying, this inability to, or I shouldn't say this inability, there's an ability, but this unwillingness to take that first step on the bridge, that stuckness in where you are rather than moving forward.
So stuck. Yeah, I think it's complicated. I think the actual resistors are not very numerous. When my client's CEO hoisted the pride flag for June and this is a defense contractor, hoisted the flag celebrating pride, and then they got maybe 8 emails, and those are the folks that are courageous enough to send an email, which is courageous and like pretty, I don't know, foolhardy. I think, because what happens then is you get escalated all the way to the CEO, and then you have a nice little chat with the CEO about, hey, maybe this isn't the right place for you to work, if you can't get on board with our values. But so I don't think that resistance is widespread. I think it's more not knowing what to say, how to get involved, and then that what my friend calls paper allyship is very convenient, and it's an easy way to get involved without a lot risked, right? It's sort of sticking the rainbow flag in your office, or supporting something, but like not really, I think, doing the work of earning allyship. And it is work. It needs to be work. It can't just be like a convenient support when it's convenient kind of scenario. And it's funny, we talked a lot about this, having World Pride just pass, and all the companies that, I mean, literally every storefront has a rainbow flag in it now. Like, it wasn't ever really that pervasive, and now it is. And so companies have gotten the memo, but there's still such an ongoing conversation about the walking of the talk the other 11 months of the year.
Right.
And there's still a lot of consternation about that. And that holds true for all the cultural celebrations, like every Hispanic Heritage Month and Cinco de Mayo. And, there's a month, every month is another celebration, Black History. So I think that employees, bless them, are really starting to push to say, we aren't just food, fun, and famous people, cocktail parties and parades.
Right.
We want to matter, I'm Black every day of the year, kind of thing.
Right, exactly.
Friends say that. I'm gay every day of the year.
Right.
And so I want to be celebrated as such. And it's a challenge, because companies are wrestling with what does that look like? How do we keep that thread, pulling that thread all year? And I think that's a real question. It's an interesting one as a org design kind of person or a comms person. Like, how do we do that without over elevating certain communities, under elevating others?
Right.
How do we make sure it's perceived as fair treatment and equal bandwidth about different issues? How do we know which issues are the ones that merit the response from the CEO? I think companies, how do they respond to the Pulse nightclub shooting?
Right.
Did they say nothing? Did they say something? Did they, it was all across the board. Same with kind of our, the unfortunate, like, constant police stories of police and Black communities and things were in the news. And that was something that so many were bringing into the workplace on a Monday morning and feeling they couldn't talk about, that they had to cover deeply and perform like it was just any other day. And so I think that the workplace is really grappling with and having to grapple in a good, healthy way with the fact that employees come with their identities. It's not just something that you leave at the door, and how will we address that besides silence? Because silence speaks volumes. And that's when your employees of difference decide, this company doesn't care about me. Like, nobody brought up anything on my team, my manager, my company. And like, I'm sitting here and I can't work. I'm so distracted and I'm so sad. And I'm so, like, what's happening in the world is impacting me so much. So I don't have answers for this. I think this is all evolving. And I'm just glad we're talking about it. And I'm trying to raise it to leaders' attention and say, how do you get comfortable with this? And don't let legal, like, steer you away all of this. Like, it's really important. But anyway, I'm not sure I answered your question, Nikki.
No, you did.
But it's so fascinating what's going on.
I think the one thing, and I'm just going to reflect back what I heard. And one of the things that came up that I made a quick note on, but I think that's kind of where you started talking about celebration and specifically talking about Pride Month, which I think is great because it's very recent, but also it's been, like you're saying, in every storefront, in every LinkedIn logo post, people had, they changed their outward veneer of sorts in different places to support, right, and to celebrate Pride Month. I think that the piece that came to me right away was like, but a lot of this stuff isn't in the celebration. A lot of this stuff is acknowledging when things that aren't celebratory, things that are difficult, things that went wrong, things where people need to be accountable and responsible and organizations need to be accountable and responsible. Those are the moments when we become silent. It's easier, right? It's easier to celebrate and say, yes, everybody can be themselves. But when it comes down to the reality of the fact that some aspect of our environment or our community, a community that we're a part of, or our employees in their lives are experiencing this, that we need to acknowledge the shadow of these experiences. We have to acknowledge the parts that aren't, sunshine, rainbows, flag waving experiences that feel great.
Yeah.
How do we do that? And I think that is, how do we even start the conversation? How do we create a safe space that's not putting the onus on the people that are the most vulnerable and raw and wounded by a lot of the experiences that happen on a day-to-day basis, that we're making it their responsibility to start the conversation or create the space. We're making it that affinity group, right?
Yes. One of my favorite topics, emotional labor.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
true.
And, you know, I think you did such a good job, though, because it really is this idea of, yes, we do need to celebrate because we've gone silent across the board in our historical patterns in our traditional workplaces. We just don't talk about who we are. I'm one person at work and I'm one person at home. And that's not just, you know, for the cisgendered white male, there's a lot of that not that long ago that you didn't talk about your family. You didn't leave for things. You were here all the time. And you were the worker of yourself. And then when you went home, you were the family man, right? That's the American worker of like Mad Men era of sorts, right? So there was a part of this that it was so ingrained in just how you become an employee that there are two different pieces of who you are. And now you have so many people in this workplace that like so much of our society, the oppressions and the systems of oppression and the inequities are making it so you can't actually, it's not possible for me to operate as a work version of myself and do it to the standard that you are hoping for me to do it. And we have such a diverse workforce that if we don't acknowledge it, we won't have enough people to support us moving forward.
Right. We really don't have a choice.
Right.
I'm really glad you brought up the harm of this like hyper masculine or alpha leadership stance that we have somehow kind of just allowed and to flourish, and we've celebrated it, we've encouraged it. It's not good for men too. Right. So, you know, we think of who's impacted when men don't take parental leave that's offered and part of a company's policy because the stigma is so great for taking it and no other men are taking it. And so they literally leave it on the table. You know, I think we've got to really, those of us who are pioneers have to normalize these things through our actions and through what we talk about. And we've got to, somebody calls it leaving loudly. Like when you leave to go to your kid's thing, like leave loudly and don't lie and say it's part of, you have a conference call. Like you talking about things normalizes things. And particularly if you have power, it's so important to do this. And so everybody having a diversity story becomes a matter of, you know, humanizing ourselves to each other, and those in power especially needing to do this because we assume that there's no connection between us and them, if there is such a thing. And but I've heard so many times that the most humbling stories from leaders that I thought would know nothing about diversity based on what I see.
Yes.
And I know people do that about me. I know they ask me, what is a white woman that looks like you doing diversity work? And lo and behold, they call me heterosexual sometimes, which is fascinating. I'm like, clearly you didn't look at who I am. Like you didn't take 5 minutes with the Google.
It's a really hard thing to do, that whole Google machine thing.
But I know that the question is asked about me and like whether I can do this work and whether I should be doing this work. And I could choose to be really hurt by that question because it's kind of hurtful, but it's a very interesting question that's coming across, which is who has the moral authority to call themselves a diversity consultant, who is diverse,
right?
Who's allowed or permissioned to talk about this. Is it the Pain Olympics, right? That's what Kenji Yoshino says. P.S. He says it's not and it can't be the Pain Olympics because it's sort of ultimately never going to go anywhere.
Right.
And so I've sort of hung in there, but I do wonder, Nikki, whether my work is going to be questioned more and more, and I really hope it's not. But that's kind of a fear. For me, and at the same time, I'm trying to desperately hold the door open for more voices. Right. I really, really am. And I believe that I have because of my identity, I got to go get my people.
Yeah.
I need to go and fix them. Yeah. And it's what Robin DiAngelo is doing every day with White Fragility and all of her speaking engagements. Like she's a white woman talking to white audiences. And that's important. That is so important because these white audiences are super clueless or really embarrassed, feeling a lot of shame, not knowing how to get out of shame and do something. And they need to explore that in a place that's hopefully a judgment-free zone. But Robin she's no shrinking violet.
Yeah.
So she can be tough on you when you need the tough love. She'll give it. And, I can give it too in probably a different way. I mean, I can't have the edgy conversation she can have in my corporate spaces. But we each do this in our own way. And each, it's good because that diversity of style and approach in how we teach is so critical too. So Robin and I are hugely different in terms of how we instigate change.
Right.
That's important. It's really important.
Yeah. And I think, I'm even hearing just the importance of curiosity in that mix, right? That because to me, when I'm hearing the feeling of, am I qualified based on my identity to talk about diversity, it's really like if you're questioning that about me and not even like there is a question that you should be asking yourself while you're thinking that the only people that can talk about this have to look a certain way or have to come from a certain group, because it is a responsibility for each and every one of us as human beings if we do believe that we're going to move toward a more inclusive and connected world. So it's not that there's one, it's perpetuating the same problem. That if we think that you have to fit a mold to do a thing, then you are just further categorizing and isolating and dividing.
You're repeating the behaviors that have been done to us, right? It's exactly, and that's not surprising, right? People who've been marginalized then turn around and become the oppressor, and then we're down this road of like call out culture and sort of the viciousness of judging people who are probably putting an effort forward, but awkwardly, imperfectly, God knows, right? And like, where is the space being held for that work? And believe me, I'm as frustrated as anybody that work still needs to happen. Like, I feel like, what, have you been living under a rock? Or what, you don't think this is important? And what, you don't have empathy for other people's experiences? Like, how could you?
Right.
And I'm deeply affected by that. Like, when I think about that, I have to twist myself up into pretzel to generate empathy amongst some people for people like me or people like you. Like, that's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
So, make no mistake, I'm heartbroken every day, like every day, and from a place of privilege. So, but the heart, I can't let the heartbreak swamp me. Like, I have to get up and fight another day. And the way I do that is by believing in human potential and believing in the human heart and believing in the ability to generate empathy. I know it's in there. I know it's in there. And I just have been shown that it's in there. And I can't unsee that. Like, I've been just too much shared with me about people's journeys that has humbled me and like surprised me, and the beauty that lives in someone that I might have thought doesn't get it.
Right.
So we have to keep representing that, and we have to keep holding out that hand and holding the door open, even if maybe forces. I have to say, there's forces on the left that don't want that hand to be held out. They do not want that door to be propped open.
Yeah.
And I get it. I'm in the middle. I'm the bridge dweller. Like, I get it. I get that, some of us just want to go and create a whole new world.
Right.
We want to bring anyone forward. Nobody deserves to be brought forward who has perpetuated so much harm.
Right.
That is a really harsh way.
Yeah. I just did a huge deep breath on that one. I'm like, whew.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
Like, those are people in my family. Those are people that I've seen change.
Right.
Like, I've seen that change is possible. Somebody asked me, what do we do with like the really like homophobic senior leader, and they just don't get it, and they're being like disciplined or whatever. And I said, the biggest resistors can become the biggest champions.
Yes.
And that is like the most exquisite challenge, I think, is to figure out like what in the world could I show this person, share with this person, expose this person to, convince with data, whatever it is, like, how could we bring them along? And I think that's the hard work. I mean, that is the work. And bless my team. Like, they do that all day long. I get to go into keynotes where people are like, yes, Jennifer, what else do you have? Like the love fest most of the time. But yeah, the corporate spaces, they have the patience of an army. It's so holy, almost, the work they do and the patience they have, and the fact that they are subject to bias, even in the consulting work. Sometimes the people we are working with are biased towards us, say things towards us, so we are literally on the front lines, and to turn around and continue to teach, continue to be patient, continue to hold space, like, it is spiritual.
Right. Yeah. And I'm gonna tap into your team a little bit, because I know that so much of the conversations we've had about finding the way to amplify this work has been when you've talked to me about the progression of your business and kind of starting as just you and then building out a team, and how it's just beautiful. I will just say, and I think I've said this to you before, but I'm reflecting it back again because it's something that I feel like is so unique in most of the environments I've been in, corporate and otherwise, that the amount of trust that you have put into this incredible team that you've built, and the reliability that comes with that, and the community that comes with that, and the magic that comes out of that trust is just, it's something I've never seen. I think it's next level. And so I'd love to hear a little bit about how trust has helped you create a team or build a team that has that is able to step into those spaces and weather the blows, but also create learning experiences and helped you grow your business.
Oh, I love that question. I love talking about business, like management and CEOing and founding and knowing what you don't know on so many levels. I mean, I was an opera singer, and then I was sort of lucky enough to find myself in a place where I could start a business and put my brand out there, and then be super vulnerable in terms of not knowing operations and finance and having to hire people and trust them to teach me what I didn't know. Right. So I knew that I had some pieces of the puzzle, but there were many that I didn't. And I knew somehow, thankfully, I knew I would not be able to survive and accomplish what I needed to accomplish if I didn't surround myself with those people. And so the trust started with those operational roles, and me turning around and taking every cent I had and giving it towards those salaries.
Wow.
Yeah. And not a lot of people decide that. I think a lot of people stay like a solo shop, or they hire more junior people.
Yeah.
I hired senior people like right away. I was like, I need this. And I knew I needed to go and do my thing. Like I needed to be in my good space because I knew, and that's such a specific space. Like it's really the evangelist for the message. It's, the image and the brand and the person behind the brand, but all the back end and the processes would need to be built by somebody else. And so necessarily, I needed to trust people. I was screwed along the way, and we don't have enough time for that in this podcast. Oh my goodness, I made mistakes. I trusted the wrong people. They stole from me. They almost brought my business to the brink several times. I had to rescue my business personally, financially, many times. And I think a lot of it was unforced errors, like self-errors. It was really, because I'm a woman in business, because I'm a creative, I was very exposed and I was very much at risk, and I didn't realize it at the time because I was under-mentored and I didn't have the right people saying, Jennifer, don't do that. Don't hire this person. That person's trouble. Don't set it this way. Let me look at your agreements. Let me whatever. And so I really encourage business owners, aspiring business owners, really make sure you've got people who are qualified looking over everything as your advisors. Make sure you're going to need to take risks on people. You're going to make the wrong hiring decisions. That's just par for the course. I mean, I am so lucky to have an amazing team now, but it took years of making mistakes.
Right.
Years. Most of the time that I've had my company. And right now I'm in the bonus round, honestly.
Yeah.
Finally, people who aren't trying to steal my business from me, steal my clients, take over, minimize my voice. I've had people in my business who were incredibly talented and who I really appreciated their work, but they were uncomfortable with my profile. Yeah. They wanted it to be all about them. I would say I have to trust. I didn't know D&I at all, and yet I pivoted into becoming a D&I company. So I had to bring on people and trust them to go in and deliver our stuff to clients who knew a lot more about this domain than I did. And I literally remember sitting in the back of the room with those people I was trusting, and taking notes on everything they said, and realizing how much I needed to learn. And so I was very comfortable. Lucky enough, I'm not a high control person.
Yeah.
And so I was so happy, being the broker for them. It was so natural for me to say, well, I might have built this thing up here and I can market and sell all day long, but I can bring in this amazing talent and sort of elevate them as the subject matter expert. I don't need to be that SME. I don't.
Right.
And so I did that for a long time, actually. I had amazing people come and go at JBC and impart their knowledge and bring their hearts and do all this amazing work. And I was really in the background. And so I never knew I'd become an SME, actually. I was probably skeptical about that. And then over time, inevitably, I wrote my book, 3 or 4 years ago, and kind of really have to own my own thought leadership. But that has happened near the tail end of the 12 years I've been in business. And that's really interesting. And I don't know if anyone's going to share that story that's listening. It might just be particular to me. But I built a company for something that I didn't really have the skill set. And then I got the skill set through some really creative means. And then finally, I sort of was able to emerge as knowing what I know now. But I really credit so many people that came my way, that agreed to come under my banner, that were happy to have me sell them in every single day, which I was really good at. And it was like this wonderful symbiosis. It really, really worked. I mean, a lot of consultants don't like to sell. Want to have an infrastructure like that. And I had the infrastructure. So I could do it and I put my little training wheels on, and I was eventually able to get rid of them. But
it's really interesting. I'm hearing it just feels like it maps so beautifully to how you were talking about bringing people on the bridge, that you don't have to step on the bridge knowing everything. You don't have to come to the party with every answer. You don't have to be an expert. You don't have to be certain, but you do have to come with a generous spirit, and you have to come with this willingness to participate and do what you are put there to do. And you don't need to become Robin DiAngelo by stepping on, right? Like, I'm not trying to make you be anybody other than yourself, and allow yourself to be in that space, because the more freedom you give yourself to be that person, the more freedom you'll let everybody else be themselves. And so it's even just the way that you've approached your business, I feel, maps so beautifully with how you're creating these spaces and the work that you're doing in organizations where a lot of times people are holding on so tight to what they think they should be doing rather than what they feel as a human being is where they should be. And those things, when they don't align, it creates a lot of distrust, mistrust.
It's a team sport. I mean, really, this takes all of us, and you cannot be everything to everyone. In fact, I think some of our clients are like, no, I'm not sure Jennifer's the right face for this. Like, do you have somebody else on your team, that identifies this way? I mean, we've been also asked for, do you have any white straight men on your team? Because, my internal group really, I think, we've tried to be heard by them, but they're not participating.
Right.
So it's really also, it's a necessity to have a lot of different faces, a lot of different backgrounds, a lot of different styles. And that's why I maintain such a big team, because we're constantly tinkering with who can be heard the most effectively with the least amount of static for this client. And that's literally how we think about assignments and resourcing things. And I know I'm not everybody's cup of tea, so I am so fine with that. And I learn from my team every day. They are brilliant practitioners. And I'm so humbled that they would actually agree to work, under my name technically, which I don't really think about it that way, but that they would be in the room representing us. I am so proud. Like, I'm just humbled by them and their knowledge and their willingness to be part of this family. And I think of it often as I might be sort of having built the house, and I pay the bills on the house, and people come and live in the house, and we have dinner together and we have community together. But I'm playing a role I can play. And it just, I don't know, things just fell into place too, in terms of me being able to now be on the keynote stage and knowing as much as I know. I have the mastery now of the topic. And it feels so good to have that, because I didn't have it for a really long time. And Malcolm Gladwell, right, does he say 10,000 hours lead to mastery for any domain? God knows, it's been more than that. And now I feel like there is like nothing I am ever surprised by. Like there is no such thing as kind of a question that comes out of nowhere where I can't connect it to something. And that's when you feel that you're like, oh, okay. Like, I have looked at this so long. And for women, this is especially important for us to recognize when we have mastery.
Yes.
To own that, and to say, like, I am one of the foremost experts on something. Like, that is scary for us to say. And so important for us to say.
Yes.
And, gosh darn it, like, I want my book to be on the Barnes & Noble leadership table and not in the self-help section.
Yes.
And I want to be making what the male keynoters are making in my space, which, by the way, I'm not yet.
Yeah.
What's up with that?
I know, seriously. What is up with that? Huh?
What is with that? So I think we need to own it. Once we've arrived, you need to see it for what it is, celebrate it, own it, and then use your voice proactively, powerfully, fill that room, back to our opera conversation. Do it unapologetically, but credit everyone that has helped to get you there. And you keep learning because diversity and inclusion is constantly changing. I mean, I'm still mastering. I still make the pronoun mistakes. I still forget to disclose them. I need to, there's muscles that I'm still really trying to build, and there's communities of difference that I don't know enough about, and I'm so the apprentice. Like I'm so kind of trying to make my own learning plans about all that stuff too. So even as you might be able to claim expertise, it doesn't mean that you're not also learning and you're not the expert in a myriad of places. And you don't have to fake it about knowing. You should say, and I say all the time, I'm a student.
Yeah.
In so many of these places, there's so much I need to learn, and this is how I'm taking ownership of that.
Wouldn't it be incredible if everybody did that? If we were all like, here's what I'm really good at, and here are the things I need to learn. Here are my strengths and weaknesses, and let's figure this out together. Oh.
No, it's not so scary to do that. I mean, honestly, that's the whole leader that so many younger people want to see, and yet we're sort of terrified to show. But it would resonate so deeply. And this is what I say: you really need to rethink what you show up as. You need to redefine for yourself, like what was scary before is now valued. So. Wow, like that is a whole paradigm shift, and it's not going away. So get on the train, start to experiment, start to build the muscle. Don't jump into allyship. Like I always say, don't try to run a marathon not having training for months. Like you need to do your work.
Yeah.
There is no replacement for that. But and don't put yourself at risk by jumping in and injuring yourself. And what that looks like in the working world is saying the wrong thing, having to apologize, having to walk something back. The whole journey. Yeah, the whole journey. And, don't make it harder on yourself. Like, be smart about how you go through the steps, get feedback along the way, adjust, ask for feedback again. It is literally like a humbling experience, and it's so beautiful.
So I feel like we're talking about your book without calling out your new book. So can you talk a little bit about your new book, How to Be an Inclusive Leader, your role in creating cultures of belonging where everyone can thrive? I know you talk about 4 stages of development becoming an inclusive leader. So if you want to talk a little bit about that and any aspect of our conversation today, I mean, I know most of it probably maps to it, but anything that you feel like is worth kind of dialing up a bit, I'm sure the listeners would love to hear more about it.
Sure thing. Thank you. We're very excited. My first book, I think, which was called Inclusion, in hindsight, it was probably written practitioner to practitioner, right? I was writing that for the advocates because I wanted them to feel seen, and I wanted to equip them with anything I could share that would help sort of structure efforts of change. This one is very much, as we say, B2C. It's for the consumer. It's for the person. It's for the individual. It's for someone who wants to be on the journey, hopefully. Otherwise, I'm not sure you'd pick up the book. Right. But who is struggling with how to get started or how to re-engage on a different level. Right. I find like some women of color like yourself have read it and said, boy, I am not using my privilege, and I have privilege. I'm intersectional, but there's always also ways that I could be teaching and guiding that I'm not activating my voice around. So it's been really, really amazing to hear that. And I think to me, that's like the litmus test of having written hopefully a good and useful book for a lot of people. But it was the 4 stages you mentioned are unaware, aware, active, and advocate. So originally it started as the ally journey. But then we studied the word ally in the market. My publisher and I did a big survey, and nobody knows what ally really means, like outside of a certain community like the ones you and I are in. So we thought that might confuse people, and we didn't want to lose them. So we called it the Inclusive Leader Continuum, but it's still the same stages. It's unaware, which is I'm apathetic, I'm not doing anything, I think I'm well-intended, I believe in equality, but I'm not really
I'm not doing anything about it.
Yeah. I'm sitting on the sidelines. I think diversity is compliance related, and so I'm just going to kind of wait it out. I'm going to check the box. It's the diversity team's job. not mine. Or maybe it's I'm not in those groups, therefore what can I add? So it's some of that. Anyway, so all the stuckness is in that first section. And the second section is aware. So once you go from unaware to aware, you're making a choice to see the problem. You know, you basically have said, okay, I get it. I'm not in denial that there is a problem. I know now that being well-intended isn't enough. I'm now I know, oh shoot, like now what do I need to learn? I'm really open to learning. I want to seek learning. So we called it aware, and a lot of the focus there is like, what am I consuming in media? What am I reading? How am I shifting my language? How am I talking to my kids about how they define these things? So it's just literally like information gathering stage, but it's still fairly private. And I think it kind of needs to be, because you have your training wheels on and you're kind of unstable. And so moving from awareness, then getting the knowledge, you move to active. So that's a big jump, and that's a jump where a lot of stuckness is happening as well. It's like, so now I know there's a problem. I know what the problem is. I can speak to it. I want to do something different. I want to use my voice. How do I do that? And honestly, that is like so many of my audiences. They're just like, I get why. Now I need to delve into the how. And this is where the rubber hits the road. And honestly, you go from private to somewhat public. You know, you start to exercise the muscle. You take it out for a spin. You are in public saying things. You know, maybe you make a comment at a meeting, or maybe after a meeting, you hold somebody accountable for a joke. Or maybe you start to select your mentees differently, and you start to mentor across difference, and you say, I'm doing this purposely. Like, this is something, Jennifer told me to do this. I'm going to do it. So that's the active stage, and it becomes more public. It's higher risk. And it's also the necessity of feedback is high in this stage. You must know how you're coming across. You must get coached by people to say, well, this came across well, but this word is not exactly one that we so like sexual preference is one of my favorite ones. I have so many well-meaning people who are like, blah, 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 regardless of your sexual preference. And they don't know that's the wrong word. We say sexual orientation because it's not a preference. Right. So, but just stopping that leader saying, hey, you may want to say sexual orientation instead of sexual preference, and having them say, great, got it, good. Like, anything else I could do differently? Yeah. That's active. That's literally phase 3. Like, I'm in it. I'm working on it. I'm able to, it's not fragile. It's not white fragility, right? It's not like, oh my gosh, I got some feedback and now I need to go underground for another year. No. And then advocate is phase 4. And going from active to advocate means that you're like, okay, I got this. Like, I'm ready to go more public. I'm ready to take risks. I'm ready to not ask for permission. I'm ready to ask tough questions of leadership. I'm ready to ask systems questions, right? I'm ready to actually look at the business as usual of organizations and put a systems lens on it and say, well, why do we have a pay gap? Like, it's not just about remedying it and calling it out, but like, let me be on the committee that actually looks at remedying this at a systems. Let me be the Mark Benioff CEO who's willing to pull 7,000 employees out of Indiana because of the Religious Freedom Bill. Like, wow. He didn't need to do that, and he did that. So that's brave. And he doesn't care what everybody else says, and he's calling his other CEOs to account to say, why are you not doing something similar?
Right, exactly.
Anyway, so that's advocate, that's level 4. So this is a progression. It's a long journey. You need to go through the steps. You can't kind of accelerate it, although you can really focus on it and make it a priority. And I think that's what I ask people to do in the book, is put one foot in front of the other. Like, just start somewhere. And by the way, what I was talking about earlier, we are all on this journey at different levels about different aspects of our knowledge. So I'm at the beginning level when it comes with, say, veterans and their experience in the workplace. I am literally at aware. Like, with that, I know there's a problem. I know that half of veterans quit after a year of being in the workplace, or leave. I know some of the data. I need more data, and I don't want to rely on veterans necessarily to tell me all that data. So I'm doing a lot of reading on research. So anyway, I'm on people with disabilities. I'm on the spectrum somewhere. For trans and gender non-binary folks, I'm on that spectrum, and so I might be viewed as somebody who's level 4 and phase 4 of advocate, but I'm working the steps all the time. So I hope that allows people too, because I get that question. They're like, well, and this with this community, because it's community, but I'm over here. Is that okay? And I'm like, yes, that's okay. Yes, it's great.
But there's movement to be made if you want. And it's so funny. I think I use a lot of reference to muscles because, growing up as an athlete, that's what I'm used to, right? Like I'm used to a lot of my progress in the sport. I played soccer growing up, and in that sport, like you learn strengths, and if you don't pay attention to a certain part, you become weaker. And so a lot of this sounds a lot like this process of building up your physical body. It's building up your inclusive leader, and not inclusive leader doesn't necessarily just mean in the workplace. This means in life. You can lead in a whole bunch of different ways. That if you leave your muscle to atrophy at level 4, you're not just going to stay there. You've got to maintain that. And in using your muscles, you might become stronger and more able, and then you learn, oh, there's this other muscle I didn't know I had that was weak. I need to build that up.
Right. Oh, that's sore. I've never worked that out before.
Exactly. And when you're talking about that like movement from unaware to aware and aware to active, like that's where you're like disgusting in your, when you're sweating and you feel like I've been doing this for 3 months and it's still just as hard or more difficult. Yeah. And it's
I love that.
It's one of those things that like it's as you mentioned, I love the continuum of it, because one day you might be closer to one aspect of the spectrum or another. Like it doesn't necessarily mean that once you get, it's not like I don't even know karate well enough to say this, but I feel like we talk a lot about the color of the belts, and it's not like once you get your black belt, you can just stay there and be in black belt this whole time. You still need to support that learning. And especially because, I think you wrote this book, you created this spectrum, and you're saying, I'm still at the aware level. Like I still got work to do. Like that's where we all are.
Right. Oh my gosh, you're giving me so many good metaphors.
Anytime. I love a good metaphor. So you feel free to give me a call.
Good. And the fact that it's Serena Williams doing her drills. Right? She's advocate level, but she's practicing the basics. Like as a pianist, you always go back and you do your Bach exercises, because they literally are like these, and you started doing them at age 5 and you're still doing them at age 50. They are literally these timeless pieces that are exercises for your fingers. And there's no age. I mean, they're timeless. And so I think you're right that we are destined to repeat these steps, and we need to humble ourselves to learning and saying what we don't know and talking about what we don't know, because I think it's really important for leaders to disclose this and not try to hide it so much, like we've been talking about today. So what does Robin Roberts say? Make your mess your message.
Oh, I like that. Oh, one of my favorite t-shirt companies, giving her a little plug. It's called Mess in a Bottle. And she's always like, it's called Mess in a Bottle. And then she always is saying, what is your message? Like, and a lot of times it's coming from that message. It's some aspect of a mess that's like a rub in your life or a poke in your life, and pay attention to it, lean into it a little bit more. Don't just shove it away.
And talk about it, because chances are everyone else is feeling this way, and they're feeling uncertain, and they're feeling like they made mistakes. And you are in doing this, you are normalizing this. And I think that creates a new baseline for all of us. Every time a leader does that, it makes it more and more kind of normal for us to then share. And it helps me, by the way, as a consultant, because I want to know what people are struggling with. I don't want them to be hiding it. I need to know, like, what is tripping you up? Like, what is feeling overwhelming or complex or something that's too risky? Like, how can I help you get over that hurdle? I mean, that's honestly the energy I brought to the book was like, tell me how I can help you, because I don't want to leave you behind. And I don't want you to not be a potential role model for somebody because you're sort of stuck, right? Because you can't bring your own story to bear. Therefore, it's not being seen in the world. Therefore, it's not healing you, by the way, because this is what our stories do, is they work on us and they heal us. And every time we talk about them, they lose a bit of their sting and they become more restorative. Yeah. So it's healing for us, but it's particularly important for others to be able to see it, to be it. And that's just so, I want that, because I didn't have that. You might not have had that. You and I looked up and we were like, oh my God, like, I don't see anyone that looks like me. Like, how am I going to do this? What's my path? Who's looking out for me? Does anybody even know I'm here? Right. That's what it felt.
And if I say anything, will it cause more problem than create any kind of benefit?
Exactly. Right. And so you stay quiet. Yeah. So we need everybody to be sharing where they are openly and admitting everything. And that will draw a lot of people to you as well who want to help. Like, that's a lovely energy to put into the world, because People want to help. I don't think people don't want to help. I think,
Right.
I mean, the line between being asked to do too much emotional labor to teach others about your life and your
Right.
identity. But I do think that there could be more partnership across difference so that we all can learn.
Definitely. And so I'm going to tap, I actually was thinking about this question a bit selfishly, but I also think as we're talking about the amount of energy that goes into these 4 stages, the amount of energy that goes into when you've been knocked down, getting back up, to transferring your mess into a message, there's a lot of energy that goes into becoming a more public version of the active part of the spectrum of the advocate. And so I'd love to hear from you. We talked about a lot about you're keynoting a lot, you're on panels, you're creating space for conversations, you're holding space for conversations, you're present for Q&As, you're creating books, you're asking questions, you're doing research, like you're out there doing this stuff. And there's so much energy that goes out into making that happen, even without using your voice. Just holding that space takes up so much energy itself, then add all the others. I'd love to hear a little bit about, a lot of people ask about self-care, and I have a hard time with that word because, again, I feel like it's been so used that it's gotten diluted and it becomes manicures. I'd love to hear a little bit about like your process of restoring your energy and filling that cup back up after or during this process of putting so much wonderful energy out in the world to make an impact.
Oh, such a good question. And I don't think a lot of us do this very well.
Yeah, I know I don't.
I know, right? You just give and you give and you give, and it's such a passion that you're sort of blinded by that. And then when self-care or lack thereof catches up with you, it really catches up with you. I think I'd say, boy, being in community and making time to be in a community where you really truly feel seen and heard, and you can kind of relax into that and not censor a single part of who you are, feels really relaxing. Like my time spent with perhaps I'd say LGBTQ women in particular is probably my most comfortable place. And people of color will say same thing. My Black friends, like we're a squad, like,
Right.
and it's really empowering to just be and to be able to have that conversation with the door closed. And so I do think there are, I guess, paying attention to where even as an advocate, you are more or less energized or taxed, and balancing the time you spend in different places, and noticing which ones restore you, which ones you can be in where you can really let your hair down, just breathe, and also where you can share anger, because that's kind of what I have to suppress all the time.
Yeah.
It's not so much fatigue. I have like a ton of stamina.
Yeah.
But clearly, yeah. The anger piece, I'm not.
Yeah.
It's sort of the collateral damage that talking about this stuff all the time and hearing the things I do and knowing the things to be true that I know, and not feeling seen and heard, or not seeing the empathy in somebody else like coming towards me. You just have to find a place where you can let go of just the frustration and just the sheer kind of cynicism of it all. And if you want to be cynical, you should be able to be in moments,
Yeah.
and be that with the right people.
Yeah.
I'd say. I think where we get in trouble is when we don't put that in the right place, and then we bring it into the training classroom or something, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's not just off-putting. I don't mean to say that. It's sort of alarming for people.
Yeah.
And I think, again, you got to meet the client where they're at, and you've got to give them things in certain doses. So my anger might be fueled into what looks like passion on the stage, and sort of strong beliefs.
Yeah.
But I know that I could get really messy on stage. I
Right.
could. I don't think it would help.
Yeah.
And I think it would hurt my ability to communicate my message. And I know anger is viewed differently, as you and I know. When women express anger, we are too aggressive. When women of color express anger, there are additional things that are said. So, yeah. So I say all this with a grain of salt, knowing that we are subject to double and triple standards. as women
Yeah.
and of color, and that makes me also angry.
Yeah. Well, and something else that I think is worth acknowledging in the way you're talking about creating these spaces where you can talk about the things that make you angry. I think one of the things that doesn't always go along with the anger conversation, because we're just being allowed to say that anger is actually beneficial if we're able to leverage it, is this idea of understanding where your anger is coming from and understanding if it's forward moving anger or it really is unresolved stuff. And then the idea of being able to actually release that anger and not shove it down as release, like actually process, understand what it is and say, you know what, this isn't beneficial for me anymore. And it's it's the equivalent of like in movies and TV shows when someone walks outside and screams and that's supposedly letting it all go. But understanding that anger is like I was gonna say gorgeous. I'll say gorgeous. A gorgeous tool if you can really understand what it is and not be afraid of it. And especially women of color have been so beat down in the area of anger that we're not allowed to be angry. If we are angry, we are emotional and just irrational, and we can't even listen to you. Go over there, handle it, and then come back, right? And this idea that you can actually transform that emotion and that passion into something that moves mountains, that like anger, being polite and happy and is not, or love and anger are not opposites of one another. They are both powerful things. Apathy, right? That unaware, I don't care. That's the opposite. That's the opposite of love, of anger, I think, because you don't care at all. Right. And so being able to understand that like anger is an amazing tool, and understanding how to understand it in yourself, and then how to activate it and use it in a way that's productive.
Yes. And just even noticing you're feeling it. I think for white women, if I could generalize, for me, even giving myself permission to be angry. I mean, really, it's culturally so suppressed.
Yeah.
That I have a hard time accessing it.
Yeah.
Actually. And so,
I feel it in my body. That's how, because I'm the same way. I've tried to figure out a way to short circuit it, because God knows it's happening, right? Like, I know it's happening somewhere, but I don't know always, because again, we've been conditioned so beautifully, right? Like the patriarchy works amazingly. It's a masterful machine that like it's there, it's happening, but how do you understand it? And so I actually have gotten to a point where like my body shakes, I get so hot, my fists clench into like white knuckles, and I'm like, oh, I'm mad about something right now. Like I might have pushed it down. I hope it just happened so I could easily access what it was. But like, right? It's like trying to figure out ways, because we have been conditioned so well, and we are these wonderful machines if we don't make ourselves more aware, and if we don't become more active, and that we don't strive for our advocacy, we are going to fall back into that kind of machine element of ourselves and suppress our emotions. And anger is such a beautiful one if you let it.
Yeah, and I the biggest anger I had in writing the book was I got really angry at my readers. Like I had this sort of surge of how could you not have empathy for me, and why am I writing a book? Why am I spending hours and days and weeks sort of depriving myself, as authors do, right? Like locking yourself in the room, trying to think about ways I could get you to care about other people and the experience they're having. Like it just made me so angry. I was so angry, and I didn't want to lose that, because I had to go back into go mode.
Yeah.
And so do we make space for it when we finally pull it up and it shows its face? Can we keep that door open for a minute, and just like ask it what it wants to tell us?
Yes.
And I don't exactly know yet what it wants to tell me. Like I don't know.
Well, it told you enough to make the book.
Yeah.
Really?
Yep. But I think it still has some message.
It's still there. Yeah.
Yep. And a question I had for myself is, how much longer can I do this work? Honestly, in that moment, I thought, this is the last book I'm going to write on this topic. Like, I can't give any more. Yeah. Like, I can't give more to people that don't want to be helped, know? Yeah. And I felt anger and sadness, like deep sadness about that.
Yeah.
But self-preservation too, around what is going to sustain me? Like, how can I keep banging my head against a wall?
Yeah.
And that was so I'm glad that sort of self-preservation kicked in, and I was like, no, like I'm better than this. Like I need to make sure that I'm sustained in this work. And so what battle can I fight where it's going to be a real battle of equals, where I'm literally going to be welcomed for what I have, and I will be heard and I will be craved for, versus trying to get in the room desperately and spending all my energy pounding on the door and throwing my body against the door. Like, I feel like I'm throwing my body against the door.
Yeah. And defining and defending and doing all this work so you can,
Not good for any of us. It's not good. It's not healthy. And yet we're being asked to do it. And so I really worry about that. I worry about that for myself. I worry about that for advocates and all of us. We are a beautiful, blessed community that's heart-centered and that's, leaving every iota of who we are on the table when we work, when we do our work, when we work with clients. Like, it's so big what we're giving.
Yeah.
And it's so generous what we're extending. And to have it not seen as that or not taken up from the other side is, I don't know what to do with that, honestly. I have to figure that out. And then I have to figure out, where am I meant to be most of service? If it's not there, then who is it for and with? Is it for the advocate level people, level 4 in the book? Like, do I need to just grab my people and say, okay, I'm going to be all about shoring you up because you're the future?
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. And it's most needed. I think the combination of this is all of us, right? What's most needed? What do I prefer to do? Where's my happy place? What is sustainable for me to do? So just because you can do something doesn't mean you should.
Right.
And where can I be the most efficient with every minute of the day and every bit of my heart? Yeah. Like, where should that be applied? And I don't know. I'm like spraying it right now. I'm sort of spray and pray.
Yeah. But it sounds like, you identified, right? You identified the aspects of your life that are making you feel more energized, that are actually being more reciprocal in this dynamic, rather than you giving and not getting anything in return. Feeling seen and heard, which again, that doesn't happen if you need to define and defend and morph yourself into something that's comfortable. If you're able to just show up and be you, God, that's an amazing place to be, because you're able to get energy back from that room, get energy back from that conversation.
And that's what I was going to say too, is being in keynotes where the audience does love you and all the comments you get afterwards. And self-care is about letting people's aha moments and gratitude actually sink in to you. And I know I'm not good at that because I'm on to the next and I'm on a plane to do the next keynote. And then things will occur to me where somebody thanked me for my talk and starts to tear up as they tell me about their kid with special needs, and how just yesterday somebody was in the sound booth for my talk, and he found me afterwards and my son has special needs, and your talk really stirred me. And I know I was in the sound booth and I'm not in the company, but you made a difference to me, and you helped me really feel how special my son is, how dedicated I am to him finding happiness in the world, and how proud I am of him, and how important your work is in the world. So thank you. And he's crying.
Yeah.
And that is something these days happens so much I can barely keep up with it all. Yeah. So you just know when you're sort of tapping into something that it's deep. Yeah. And what's important is to let it in and just let it heal you, because that is what all of us are trying to do, is heal.
let it fill your cup, really, because it's the same idea of allowing yourself to say you're a master at something, allowing yourself to embrace the impact that you're making, rather than saying I'm always a work in progress and there's more than I can do. Really sitting in that and allowing yourself to be showered in the reason you're doing the work you're doing, because it's really difficult to sit in that and feel that way and really find your zone and your flow of being on stage and feeling great about that and then having that reaction. It's really difficult from that place to feel that full-fledged anger that really is there, right? But it can offset it. It offsets it nicely.
You're right. You're right. It almost it's a balm for it, right? It's a little bit of water on the fire. It's soothing, it's connecting, it's I do think it smothers the fire a bit in a really good way with oxygen. Think about oxygen feeds a fire. That's not the right metaphor. But it replaces it. I think it supplements it. I think those both can live together as well, which is really interesting. Like you were alluding to, that these are not opposites.
Right.
what are the two emotions in the world? Love and fear.
Yeah. Oh,
And,
yeah.
if we can channel both of those, fear is, fear leads to anger, I think. At the baseline, it is fear of not being loved, seen, heard, valued. But you're right that I think it makes these moments really sweet. So I would say, hopefully, as all of you listening to this kind of find your sweet spot and you start to get accolades, really, really listen to them, take them in, print them out, read them, say them out loud, and it's funny, I don't think I'd be saying this as a man, FYI.
Yeah.
I don't think they think about it this way. I don't know about what you think, but
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it goes back to so young. I think that at least I can speak from my experience I was told from a very young age that if somebody told me I was pretty, to not take that. If somebody said I was good at something, to really compliments, if you take a compliment, it actually makes it worse than if you never got a compliment at all. And so you need to be quiet, you need to be small, you need to not be showy, you need to not be flashy. And so even all that, that plays into this whole idea of, am I allowed to celebrate my successes? Am I allowed to understand that what I'm doing is helping other people and helping myself and helping move things forward? Am I allowed to do that? Because so much of my life, I wasn't allowed to celebrate my successes. Even, I mean, take the women's national team, right? They're scoring 13 goals in their first game, and they're not allowed to celebrate that.
That's crazy.
Right? That's
to them, we said, oh, that's unseemly of you.
Right. Right. So it's not even just our internal battle of that stuff. It's worldwide, and it's something that, thank goodness, we have platforms where people can use their voices that aren't necessarily mainstream media, and that mainstream media is becoming more diverse and a little bit more involved in having more of a discourse. But these are things that are not just us. We're not crazy in our own space about this. This is happening, and it's really difficult to overcome stuff if you can't label it, identify it, and actually see that it's a pattern outside of yourself, because we're all so wonderful at beating ourselves up.
Yeah, and when you think you're the only one, that is where we tend to go, and that is not accurate. It's just not accurate. So once you learn that, you're like, that is not true. I know there are people that are experiencing this. I'm not crazy, and that's what affinity groups are so valuable for, is of any kind, is just to be in community and say, this happened. This is what I'm feeling. I'm struggling with this. Are you as well? How have you solved it? That's where that knowledge exchange amongst us. We're less alone. We're never alone. But we perceive that we're alone, and then we can lean on each other for coaching and support and atta girls, and you could do this, and you are that. You are what people say you are. And I want my friend Sharon, I love her. She says, I want you to just soak in this. I want you to feel what this person is saying to you. I really want you to just own this, because you are making a difference in the world. And she's this amazing coach. And so are you. You have to have people in your life that see you for what you're creating, and they remind you of what you're creating and the significance of it. And they pause and they say, before we talk about anything else, I just want to know, are you taking that in? Because that is huge.
Yeah.
You got chosen for this, that you got that job, that you got acknowledged by that leader, that you I don't know, got your round of funding.
Right.
Anyway, so we have to do it for each other. We have to do it for ourselves, and not be so darn perfectionistic and type A like women tend to do, because you're right. We're so used to being less than and needing to play small that I think that accounts for our perfectionism, that it's never enough even.
Right.
We keep pushing, we keep saying, well, we need more accomplishments and we need more of this to actually feel like we belong here. That's perfectionism, and that's one of the deadly diseases. As my one of my consultants says, she's like, honey, that's a white woman disease. Really interesting. I'm like,
Oh, damn. Yep.
Yeah, true.
You're like, what's the cure? Do we have any, Oh my goodness. Well, I mean, I could talk to you for 7,000 hours.
This is so great.
Feels like the first time we met each other, when we were like,
we have long dinners.
Then 4 hours later.
I know. We're like, where did the time go?
Well, I just want to say thank you. Beyond, I mean, thank you for your time today, but also just thank you for all the incredible work you are doing, and the voices that you are allowing to step into a space that they didn't know they had permission to do, just by providing your wonderful books, providing your amazing insights through keynotes, holding spaces. Those are things that they're very real. And it's not just when you're in that room. That stuff amplifies out so much further than I'm sure you're even aware of. And that, I know from being around you that I'm feeling it in my body as you're talking about it, being like, yeah, I know what they're talking about. That guy coming out of the booth, I get it. Yeah, I'm the person that was like, hey, hi, I'm Nikki. How are you? Yeah. So
Thank you for
you.
seeing me and the acknowledgments and everything. I'm going to take that in now. I'm going to
soak it in like a sponge, please.
I am trying.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Nikki.
Isn't Jennifer just incredible? See, I didn't oversell you by telling you my face hurt from smiling so hard before we started the episode. She is just next level. So, yes, August 20th is Tuesday coming up here. If you are listening to this before August 20th, feel free to go and place a pre-order for the pre-sale. If it is August 20th or afterwards, go get that book. It's both in hard copy and on Audible. If you want to continue to hear Jennifer's wonderful voice as she walks you through that wonderful spectrum we just talked about, how to be an inclusive leader, my goodness, go and snag your copy there. I am just so excited that you made it to the end of this one, though I can't blame you. I will probably listen to this like multiple times. I'm already on my third pass as I'm recording this now. So yes, I'm excited for you. I'm amped for you. Also, I just want to let you know we have some insanely wonderful episodes coming your way. There is this wonderful one that was the longest conversation I've had yet. And before we ever started recording, we had a good 45 minutes before of chatting too about social justice with an incredible social justice educator, leader, expert. I don't know, there's so many good words for him. So keep an eye out. That will be I believe will be our next episode. There's going to be an episode about the Me Too culture in the workplace and about sexual harassment in general and normalizing conversation around sexual harassment, sexual assault. That's going to be amazing. I have some other guests I can't even get it out. I was filing so hard. I have some other really exciting guests coming your way. I don't want to overly tease those out. Needless to say, if you haven't subscribed yet, do. There's some really amazing stuff coming, and I just feel like such a lucky person to be able to be in conversation with some incredible human beings. So I will catch you on the next episode. And in the meantime, got anything to say, drop it in social media and any of the comments or over on that wonderful outreach form. Again, nikkyinnocent.com/podcast. Join the conversation. And if you haven't headed over to the episode show notes, please do. As you already know, at the end of here, there's so much stuff we covered. I've got quick links so you don't have to try to remember it all. It's on there. Okay, my friends, catch you next time.